Hello everyone, welcome back to Meters P.E.Vs. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to re-grease your rear hub motor on your e-bike. I'll be doing this to my Ariel Rider X-Class, but the process should be about the same for just about every geared hub motor e-bike there is out there. So it should be a pretty simple process. We just need to remove the rear wheel, open up the hub motor assembly, get everything greased up and put it back together. Show you exactly what you guys need to do for the X-Class. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. Alright, once you get your bike all taken out, this is going to be a lot easier to do if we have the bike upside down. Make it a lot easier to get to all the necessary bolts and everything on the rear hub. So just flip everything over so your bike's upside down like this, and then we can start working on taking off the rear wheel. Alright, now that we're looking at the back of the X-Class here, first thing we're going to want to do is disconnect our motor with the quick disconnect right here. Just need to spin this silver barrel until the other connector is free and able to be pulled out. Okay, that's that. There we go, we have that disconnected. I just have mine wrapped on here with electrical tape. If you haven't done this before, taking off your rear tire, then this will just be zip tied on in place. So get that loosened up. And now we have our motor cable out of the way. And just hanging out loose like this. Next step we're gonna wanna do is take off this black protective cap on the rear hub. That'll expose your nut that holds your rear axle on. Alright, so to remove this rear nut, I'm actually using the Ariel Rider toolkit with the 22mm wrench. Honestly, this is a bit loose, but the 19 doesn't fit. So if you have your own set of tools at home, I would get an adjustable crescent wrench or something like that so you don't round over this bolt at all. Because if you're removing this for the first time, it will definitely be pretty tough to get off. But since I've already had my back wheel off, it wasn't too bad. So you just need to loosen this and get this the whole way off. Make sure you set all your nuts and bolts aside in a place where you'll remember, not lose anything, and know where they all go. After you remove the nut, you'll have to work on removing this little torque arm right here. Use a 4mm Allen wrench, and you'll be able to take off this little Allen head screw here and get this loose. Again, make sure you don't lose any of your parts once you set this all down. And then you should be able to wiggle this little plate off. Probably might be stuck on there for a little bit. Might be easier to take off once we get everything else loosened up, which I think is going to be the case. So we're going to leave that for now and start working on the other side. Let's start working on the other side. So again, first we're going to have to take off black protective cap here. Get rid of that. And then it's our big nut underneath that holds the rear axle on. Again, these can be very tough sometimes, so just give it some force. And if you have a better proper wrench, I would highly suggest that rather than the ones that Ariel Rider gives you. But this is all I got. So once you get this nut loose, you're gonna have to work on getting this derailleur hanger off. Just again, one 4mm Allen screw goes into the bottom and keeps everything tightened. And once you remove this, you should be able to break this free and pop off your derailleur hanger. Make sure you don't lose your Allen screw for it as well. Alright, now that we got pretty much everything taken off the rear wheel, we can work on pulling this out. So whenever you pull your wheel up, you gotta be careful you get your chain around the axle so you can get that slid out of there. And on the other side, you have to worry about your brake disc. You want to pull that straight up so you're not grinding your brake disc on your brake pads and scuffing those up. It may take a little force to get this wheel popped out, but once she's loose, it'll be pretty easy. So just get a good grip on your wheel. Try to give it a little pop up, holding down on your bike. Might need to give it a couple taps to get her ready to move. I felt that get loose there. Alright, loosen that out. So you're going to want to hold your derailleur up a little bit and kind of guide your chain off of the side. And then once you get that free, you should be able to just pull your rear wheel out like that. Now be careful once you take your rear wheel out. There are a few special little washers that go on your axle right here. You do not want to lose these, or else it'll cause some pretty serious issues for your bike. So these are just on the inside here and have a little tab to keep your motor locked in. Don't want to lose those, and make sure they stay in the same place. Now we have the rear wheel off the X-Class. I set my rear wheel up on a couple of Amazon boxes. This is just nice and makes it easier to work on, and that way your axle isn't digging into your carpet. So once you get everything taken apart, you'll see that we need to remove these 6 torque bit screw heads to remove the rear brake disc right here. Now make sure you actually use a star-shaped torque bit like you see here, not an Allen key. If you do, you'll end up stripping out these bolts and won't be able to get it back on. So this is the first time I've removed this brake disc. It is going to take a little bit of force to get these all broken loose and taken off, but you're just going to need to go through and carefully take each one of these out. One word of advice is I'm going to make a small mark with Sharpie on my motor here, and also make a mark on the brake disc lining up to it. This way, whenever I put it back on, I'm going to put the brake disc in the exact same spot that it was before. This way, if there's any sort of warp or bend in the rotor that works with the motor, it'll just help so your brake is less likely to get out of whack once you put everything back together. For now, let's work on taking these torques out and getting this brake rotor off the wheel. Alright, now once you get all your 6 torque screws loosened up out of your brake disc, you can take these out and make sure you don't lose them. So now we got all our bolts taken off. You can see our rotor is loose and floating. Try picking up your rotor from the inner sides here. Try not grabbing it right where your brakes run along the side, because extra finger grease can make your brakes a little squeaky. Now you're just going to want to carefully take this rotor off, freeing it over your motor wire and not scraping that up too badly. And then you're left with this right here down to the hub motor. Alright, so we're going to work on taking this hub motor off. You're going to need one 3mm Allen key, and that should be all you need to get all these bolts removed. All right, now it looks like we have all 6 screws removed for this hub motor plate. So we're gonna have to work on getting this removed from the rest of the wheel here. Now, this might give us a little bit of trouble since I haven't taken this off before, and I'm sure it gets stuck on there pretty good. So I'm gonna just lightly use a small flat bit here to just see if I can work up any of these edges a little bit. I'm not pressing very hard or trying. I'm just trying to loosen it up enough to get some room under there and be able to work this thing up. After a little pry there, looks like this started to loosen up. So I think we should be able to pull this whole thing out. So there we go. Just pulled out the whole motor assembly here. So set this somewhere safe for right now, and we'll take a look at the inside and see what that looks like. Here's the inner ring gear here that is for the planetary gear set on the end of that motor. This is what really powers the bike and gets all your power from the motor transmitted to this rear wheel. So you can see there is a touch of grease still sitting around, but it's not very much. They definitely went pretty light on the coating here, and thankfully I can't seem to see any sort of metal shavings or shards or any chipped teeth on the gear set here. But this is definitely something you're going to want to look over before you put it all back together. Make sure all the teeth look nice on this gear, and doesn't look like there's been anything grinding or wearing down inside. And the same goes for the motor. So we'll check this out. You want to spin it around and check over all of these small white nylon gears here. Make sure there's nothing that looks bad or out of place. But so far everything seems to be moving pretty freely, and don't seem to see any major issues. So I'm going to look over all these teeth and take some time to go through each one, but so far everything's looking pretty well. You can see there's a little bit of messy looking grease right up here, but there really isn't all that much for this whole motor. Alright, after checking out the old motor, everything seems to be working pretty well here. Planetary gears all seem pretty good. There's a couple ones that have teeth with a little bit of wear, but nothing too serious or anything to be really concerned about. Now, if you were missing teeth on these gears, that's definitely something you should look into getting replaced. But everything on mine looks pretty good shape, and honestly, I'm happy to see that after how long I've had this bike and how many abusive miles I've put it through. So right now I'm just going to go through with the paper towel and work on wiping all this old grease off. If you don't get every last bit of it, it's alright, but you want to get as much as you can so there isn't any old pieces of metal or stuff just wearing on any of your parts once you get the new grease in. Once I get this all finished getting cleaned up, I'm going to work on cleaning out the inside of the hub motor assembly. So now I'm going to work on cleaning out this inside ring here. So you can see there is a bit of old grease, and it looks like some thread locker sitting in here from breaking these bolts. So you're going to want to make sure this whole area is cleaned out. There's no contaminants inside, and everything looks nice and fresh before you throw the grease back on. Now that everything is cleaned up, we can work on re-lubricating. For this project, I'm going to be using this Super Lube. I got this off of Amazon. I'll have a link down below in my description. So this is pretty important, the type of grease that you use. You want a thicker grease that's going to stay stuck around the chainring and on all your gears. And you also want to have something that's dielectric. Dielectric means that it doesn't conduct electricity well. And with this hub motor being open like this, it's very easy for some of the grease that goes on your bearings or on your gears to easily go into the motor windings here. Now, obviously, you don't want to overload it with grease because you don't want this to be flooding out your motor with grease. But if some does get in with the dielectric grease, it's not going to short your motor. It's not going to cause any problems, and this should last for, honestly, the rest of the lifetime if you get a good application, or for a lot longer than the amount of grease that they put in there before. So actually I'm going to work on greasing the motor here first. So I think the easiest way to do this is have it set up exactly like mine, where you're just resting on the back plate here. If you hold on to the shaft and spin this metal ring, this will actually allow all the planetary gears to turn as well. So this will be a good way to get your grease applied. So going to want to take our Super Lube here, just get a pretty healthy dollop and start kind of wiping it in on the outside of the gears. Now try your best to make sure you get it just kind of on the actual teeth of the gears. If you get some on the side of this motor cage, it will be fine, and honestly it does need a little bit on the sides, but that'll just work in over time. Really, you just want to focus on getting all the teeth of each of your gears lubed up. Now don't be afraid to use this. You can use a good bit. Like I said, if you put way too much in, it is possible to flood it out with the motor, but just enough to get all your gears coated. So I'm gonna work on just kind of spinning the motor, working that grease into each of my teeth, and once it gets spinning, you'll actually start to hear that grease sticking around and grabbing onto the other teeth. I think it actually might be a little bit easier to do it like this. Just take your bottle of grease and kind of rub it on the outside of each of the gears like that, and then spin it around to get everything worked in. You can actually might be able to hear the grease kind of sticking on to each of the teeth. That's a good thing. So again, keep working it. You really can't go with too much grease. It'll all get eventually worn around to all the places that need it. So now when you're doing this, you also kind of want to make sure once you start working it in that you see it on the insides of these gears here. They have a pretty tight tolerance with some of these metal plates that it rides beside. So all that stuff should be protected and greased up pretty well. I'm gonna do one more round on all these gears. Try that out, and then I think we should be pretty good for the motor. All right, so the motor's looking pretty properly greased up. You can see it's kind of rubbing a little bit on the sides of the motor cage right here. The sides of our gears are covered, and most importantly, all the teeth have a little bit in between. Alrighty, so now that we have applied all our grease on the actual hub motor itself, we're going to work on getting the inside of the gear ring here. So again, we're just going to kind of go through and try squeezing this lube out on the teeth. It's a little bit harder to get it in here with the bottle, but again, don't be afraid. More grease is good. Always want lubrication on your motor and all your gears. Make sure you get it in between all the teeth here. And try to keep it just on the actual gear set itself. A little bit on the edges won't kill you, but it needs it the most right on this gear ring. So that was a pretty good application. I'm probably gonna do one more swipe around, and it honestly looks pretty coated. So. All right, so now we have our inner gear ring all coated in. It's probably a little hard to see, but each of those teeth are pretty filled up with grease. There's a little bit on the side excess that you can wipe off and throw back on the gear ring. Like I said, try to get most of your grease around the actual gear set itself, and a little bit on this side here won't hurt, but you want to keep it mostly on the gear. So I'm going to check the motor one more time, and I think we can work on putting everything back together. All right, now it looks like we got both of our motor and the actual hub itself geared up pretty properly, so we can work on putting everything back together. So you're going to work on taking your motor, line up your shaft with the bearing inside, and just lightly set this down. Once you get on the gear teeth, you might have to shimmy it around a little bit to get everything to line up, and then she should drop right inside. Now we're just going to have to work on putting all of our bolts back in place. When you do this, it's a good idea to tighten these bolts up in a star pattern so you don't put the motor cap on a little sideways or crooked or have any openings causing any issues. All right, now we got all our bolts slightly snugged up, so let's go around in a star pattern and get everything torqued down. All right, everything seems pretty tight. So now we're just gonna have to repeat the process with our brake disc here and the special torque screws that it has. I would suggest going and washing your hands, making sure you got all the grease off your fingers before you go around touching your brake pad, because don't want to put grease on your brake disc. All right, time to install the brake disc. Make sure you got your lettering facing out, and if you marked your brake pad, try to check that you got that in the same place. I have my mark here and my mark on the brake disc over there, so I'll have to get that lined up. Start by feeding your motor cable straight through the middle of your brake. Get that lined on and then set on the shaft. I just got to line up. You had your brake pad and start tightening down these screws again. Again, use the star pattern to ensure that you don't get your bolts torqued out of spec or your rotor sitting crooked or anything. Alright, once you get all your bolts hand tightened down, make sure they're all in. You can work on putting everything in and torquing it down. Looks like we got everything set back together. Make sure that brake feels nice and snug on there. All your bolts are in tight. You don't want any of these backing out on you on your ride. Not only could your brake fall off, but I've also seen people not tighten these down enough and it actually cuts into your motor wire there. You'd have to get a whole new motor and wheel, which is expensive. So now we got everything back together. It should just all be putting your rear wheel back on the bike, and I think we will be good to go. All right. Going to work on putting the wheel back on. Make sure you put these washers on your axle first. That's a pretty important part of the bike here. You don't want that to get left out. So putting your wheel back on, you got to be a little careful you don't scuff up your brake disc too much and get your chain on right. So once you get it in, kind of lift your chain over on this side and set it down over here. Gotta watch your brake disc. Make sure you get that lined up nicely. And be careful not to hit your pads too much if you can avoid it. But looks like that's all good there. I'm gonna just pedal it, make sure my chain's set on there right. And it looks like we're in pretty good shape. So once you get those washers in, the little tab that's on those should be facing towards the bottom of the bike, towards the ground. Well, since it's upside down, it's facing up, but when your bike is down, those should be pointing downwards. So there's one on this side and then one on the other. That just helps so your bike doesn't twist or your motor shaft doesn't twist. So all we're gonna have to do is go on the reverse step and put everything back on that we took off. On the derailleur side here, we need to put on the derailleur protector and our little screw, and then just throw the nut back on and we'll be good to go. Start by sliding on that derailleur hanger or derailleur protector here. Get your little Allen key lined up. Start it in a little bit. And then use that 4mm Allen to tighten it in the rest of the way. All right, got that derailleur guard all snugged up. Then all we're gonna need to do is take our axle nut, finish tightening that on. Make sure you get that pretty snugged on there. Don't want your axle coming loose on your ride. Seems pretty tight. And then finish her off with the black protector cap. Now let's do the same thing on the other side, except using this little key instead of the derailleur hanger. All right, let's get this other side put back together here. Get your little metal torque arm, put that on first. The Allen screw that goes with that. And then tighten that on. Very good. Next, put that axle nut back on. Tighten that up well. Make sure that's snugged up well. That feels pretty good. And then finally, put the protective cover over here. And then we got to reattach our motor wire. So take a look at this, make sure you have everything lined up before you plug it in. Get that started and then thread on the silver connector as tight as you can with your fingers. And that'll make everything nice and tight. Now here is where you're going to want to use zip ties, or I might just have to use electrical tape and re-tape up your wire, your motor wire here, so it's not loose and flopping around, because you don't want that to come off and run into your brake disc or something like that. But before we can do that, we'll spin our tire, make sure everything looks pretty straight. Oh good, I don't hear any brake rubbing. Looks like the derailleur's good. I'm going to pedal that. Seems to be lined up and working well. So looks like we should be in pretty good shape. I'm gonna flip the bike over and we'll power it back on and make sure everything works out good. There we have it. Bike's all put back together. All right, let's stick our battery in and power the bike on. Make sure everything works well. Now we got our battery on the bike. Let's power it up. So, looks good. There we go. Running well. We're gonna go out on a ride here in a bit and see how it sounds while we got some load on the bike. So far, it definitely seems a bit quieter. We'll see if we can feel any difference in the ride, but looks like we got everything put back together well. So let's check it out on the road. All right, gonna go for a little ride and see if we can notice a difference. Unfortunately, I was an idiot and didn't get a before and after, well, I didn't get a before riding video of what it sounded like, so probably have some other videos I can maybe give it a comparison to, but I mean, the bike has always been a little bit louder. Hasn't ever really been bothering me, but better to do some preventative maintenance and keep this bike running for a while and then have something happen to it. Let's see, I got about 1,300 miles on the bike so far, so definitely worth doing to keep this thing running. So let's go out for a cruise and see if I can tell a difference. Honestly, it does already feel a lot more quiet. It'll be more noticeable when I'm going fast. Oh yeah. Oh, that feels good. That definitely sounds a lot quieter, especially going up to speed. Okay. Let's give it some time to work into these gears here and give it a little bit of heat in that motor, but yeah, I can definitely tell a difference. I'm gonna do a clip of me riding down with the microphone pretty close to the motor. That we can hear what it sounds like. I can definitely tell a pretty big difference on takeoff. Definitely feels a lot quieter. Cruising like 15 miles an hour and everything feels really smooth. No motor noise or anything, so pretty impressed with the changes I see for only changing out the grease on this motor. So overall, I think this is a pretty good upgrade for the $7 it costs for the new grease. If you guys are looking to do this yourself, I have an affiliate link down below with the link to the grease that I used. So I appreciate you guys tuning in and supporting my channel. If you did like the video, a like and comment would be greatly appreciated. And if you want to see more videos on the X-Class or many other exciting P.E.Vs, then be sure to hit subscribe. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you later.